there's a mimer, a teaching, a discourse from the Alter Rebbe that's printed in Parshas Yisro, the portion of Yisro connected with the Maaseh Merkava, the revealing of the chariot. And this is a mimer. It's a short teaching, relatively short. Seems to be clearly a mimer that's before Peterburg in the early versions of the Alter Rebbe's teachings. And the mimer itself is a teaching that the Alter Rebbe heard from Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, Mendel Haradoker, who heard it from the Maggid of Mezritch, the primary student of the Baal Shem Tov. And this was the first teaching, first mimer that the Maggid said in Tavkuf Chav Aleph. That's 1761 on Shavuos, and it's this is the Maggid after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. A year later, he became the Rebbe. He became the leader and the master of the main students of the Baal Shem Tov and the following students. And this is the first teaching that he taught. And Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, Rebbe Mendel Haradoker was there presently, and he repeated this teaching over to the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, repeated this mimer in his own way, in a Chabad way. What's interesting about this mimer, besides the mimer itself, is that this is a mimer that the Alter Rebbe hears from a Mendel Haradoker, Mendel of Vitepsk, who heard this mimer from his Rebbe, which is the Maggid of Mezritch, his teacher, which is the Maggid of Mezritch. Now we know that after the Maggid passed away, the Maggid was a Rebbe about 12, 13 years, Tavkuf Lamed Zayin, 1773, and after the Maggid passed away, the Alter Rebbe, who was a young man then, a very young man, he was born Tavkuf Hey, he was born in 1745, and this is 1773. The Alter Rebbe, with Reb Zusha of Hanepali and Yudlei Bakoyin and others, wrote Eksavis Kashas. They wrote that they're committing their life and they accept upon themselves that their Rebbe, their new master, will be Rav Avram HaMalach. Rav Avram HaMalach, Rav Avram the angel, who's the only son. It's the Ben Yachid, the only son of the Maggid of Mezritch, of their Rebbe. And in Beis Rabbi and other books of record the history of the chronological history of the Alter Rebbe, speak about that the Alter Rebbe was Makabel, received Torah from the Maggid, and then after the Maggid passed away, after his primary Rebbe passed away, he received Torah for at least a year, besides being a Chaver. So he learned with Rav Avram HaMalach, even the time when the Maggid was alive. After the Maggid passed away, Dover passed away, the Alter Rebbe became connected to Rav Avram HaMalach, and he was considered a Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe, a teacher of the Alter Rebbe. Afterwards, it's known that Rav Avram HaMalach said that he doesn't want to do it any longer, and the Alter Rebbe became connected to Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk. And he became connected to Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk for about 4 years when Rebbe Mendel was still living in White Russia, in Belarus, in that area. And then Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk went to Eretz Yisrael, went to Israel, together with Avram Karlisker. The Alter Rebbe also wanted to go on this journey to take up residence in Eretz Yisrael and Israel, but Rebbe Mendel told him to stay back in Russia, in White Russia. And the Alter Rebbe still considered himself a chassid of Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk. Exactly what the relationship was it a chassid and a Rebbe, or a Rav and a Talmud? Was an actual student? Was Alter Rebbe a student of Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, or more a chassid that he saw Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, a holy person, a ish kaddish, and an honor of a tremendous humble person, and he connected himself like a chassid? or was he considered like a type of Rebbe to him? It's a little unclear. The Rebbe spoke about this many times, a few times. Imam Aleph, and the last time in Parshas Pekudei, and then also in Simchas Torah, Memchas, which I heard, the Rebbe spoke about to understand whether Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk could also be considered a part of Rebbe, one of literally the teachers of the Alter Rebbe. But what's interesting is that the Alter Rebbe himself writes, was clearly very dovuk to Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, very connected to Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, and he didn't become a Rebbe only after the pushing of Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk for many years, and after Rebbe Mendel passed away. But the Alter Rebbe writes in the beginning of Tanya that we know that it says that the book is based on Svarim and Seifrim, and the tradition is the Svarim is the teachings based on books, the teachings of the Maharal and the Shalal Kaddish, and Seifrim, the scribes, refers to his teacher, the Maggid of Mezritch, primary teacher, and to the Baal Shem Tov. But it's interesting, that's the version that we have now, which is the second version. But in Madur Kama, the earlier version of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes that, quote him, quote Alter Rebbe, says that Lukat misfarim pesoifrim k'neish Ayin v'ktsas ermozim l'chakim be'igers hakodesh me'besenish haberes hakodesh, and some of it is hinted to in the letters that I received from my Rebbes in Israel. V'ktsas shamaytim epim hakodesh b'chayim pa'imanu b'yosem pa'imanu, and some is what I heard from my teachers when they were here, which means that the Alter Rebbe is saying that the Tanya, the parts of the Tanya, he's yoidik, he's drawing inspiration and understanding from things that say also that he heard either before Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk left Eretz Yisrael, went to Eretz Israel, or even before that, or later on in the letters and the correspondence that he received from Rebbe Mendel. So the Alter Rebbe clearly is writing things that he heard from Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk. You can see this. You can see this with Tanya. There's certain things that the Alter Rebbe we say is a chiddush from Alter Rebbe, and it is a chiddush from Alter Rebbe. It's a novelty in the Alter Rebbe. But you see that a similar idea in an earlier version expressed also already in the teachings of Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk. And Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk Sefer is called Priarts. In this book, you find teachings. For example, that phrase, even though that phrase is already found kadmonim before the Alter Rebbe, before Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, even with the word mamash, but that it refers to everyone in Klal Yisrael, to every single yid. That is, every yid has a chelik l'kal mimal mamash, a little part of the divine within them. This is a phrase that you found in Priyards, I think it's Mashal Yeshiv, but there's a lot of ideas that you find. But what's also interesting, and I think it's more interesting, is that the Alter Rebbe is davuk to his teacher, his primary teacher is the Maggid of Mezritch, and then a semi-teacher is Rav Rama Malach, which is the son of the Maggid, and also kind of a teacher is also Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk. These are the three main influences during life in the Alter Rebbe's times. Of course, the Maggid is a student of the Baal Shem Tov. But if you look very clearly in the teachings of the Maggid, it's going to be relevant to the mimer that we're going to learn, because this is a very clear expression of the teachings of the Maggid of Mezritch. The teachings of the Maggid is very different than the teachings of the Baal Shem. We have to understand how they're related, but that's another conversation. Obviously, it's the Or Torah Chassidus, the light of Torah Chassidus, but in the actual expression of it, the Maggid speaks much more about the idea of Ayin, of the nothingness, of the emptiness. The emptiness could be in the experience of nothingness, the emptiness of all thoughts. Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk talks about this idea of Chassidim sha'achas, that the pious ones would wait an hour to empty their minds and to have ispashtus, hagashmis, which the Torah brings down, this divesting of the physicality. And Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk talks about this in Mechinas Ayin, a level of Ayin, which is that the emptiness of all thoughts, that you're not thinking anything, your mind is clean of thoughts or of expressions. The idea of in experiences, in type of subtle meditative experiences where a person is davuk, connects himself very much with the Ayin, the emptiness, the transcendence of all form, very much not embodied, but almost the opposite direction a disembodied experience where a person is entering in a place of transcendence, connected to the nothingness. Nothingness means the ayin, the thing that doesn't have form, the nothing of existence, the no thing of existence. And experienced in many different ways. This is a very primary teaching of the teachings of the Maggid. And the Maggid embodied this, of course, and it's so much so that it just happens that Solomon Maimon, which was a Kantian philosopher, later being a Kantian philosopher, was once passing by, and he ended up in the Maggid's table for a period of time, and he writes in the autobiography that what the Maggid's primary teaching, was discouraging to him, but he didn't have enough seichel, didn't have enough intelligence to understand the depth of it, was that the Maggid kept on speaking about the word of Ayin. Ayin was a very prominent word, the nothingness. In fact, you find the word Ayin, and all the students of the Maggid speak about the word Ayin in a very prominent way. For example, even the Baditchever, which seems to be very much a type of character, a type of tzaddik that was very embodied. Almost every page in Conduit Levi says the word Ayin, but all the tzaddikim, all the students of the Maggid speak about this. But the purest form of these teachings of Ayin, at least in my estimation, is found in the teachings of Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, and also in Rav Malach, in the teachings of Rav Malach. Very subtle, edel Torah, very subtle Torahs. For example, Chassidic Avram, which is a book of the teachings of Rav Malach, where he talks about the idea of spheres, of the spheres, the 10 emanations. So the Rebbe Malach speaks about them in terms of sichlim, in terms of like forms of intelligence, forms of refined intelligence, very refined, very abstract, a very deep, contemplative, silent style, inner states of consciousness and quietness and stillness into the place of nothingness is very much found in the Rebbe Malach, and that's why we call him an angel because he represented that. You find it also in the Torah of the pre-arts of the Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk. The Sefer pre-arts is also a very difficult Sefer to comprehend because it's also very subtle, very devoid also the spiritual work that he demands, and of course something that he experiences as well. He's talking from experience. Is very, very demanding, a very refined, very edel, very transcendent-like. And what's also interesting is that when they printed the pre-arts, when they printed the Sefer, this book by Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, they also included teachings by Rebbe Malach, and there was a lot of teachings by Rebbe Malach, and I think it's matim, it makes sense because they're very much consistent. They have this very similar teachings, and it's clear that they're very clear davuk in the teachings, connected to the teachings of the Maggid himself. And I think this is the reason why the Alter Rebbe was another reason why the Alter Rebbe was davuk to these particular tzaddikim, because after the Maggid passed away, some of the younger students of the Maggid of Mezritch, for example, the cousins of Maggid of Lublin, others became davuk to Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, which was an older Talmud, older student of the Maggid, even though a little further he went to Poland. But the Alter Rebbe was specifically davuk in Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, I think because he saw within Rebbe Mendel and Rebbe Malach, he saw the pure teachings of the Maggid. And the Alter Rebbe really embodied this. The Alter Rebbe was a Talmud Muvik of the Maggid, and he embodied these teachings as well. And the Alter Rebbe gave oasis of Chabad, intellectual and structural language to the teachings of the Ayin of the Maggid of Mezritch, through which he received from Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk and Rebbe Malach. So the Alter Rebbe really got this method of the teachings of the Maggid in this way that he took the teachings themselves and broadened the teachings themselves, which is a lot more to talk about. But that's so that's in general what is happening. So this is an interesting mimer. This is a very interesting discourse because it's the first mimer that the Maggid himself says. That's heard through the lens of another teacher, secondary teacher of the Alter Rebbe, which is Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, and then the Alter Rebbe repeats it in his own oasis, in his own words, through this prism of Chabad. This we have in the Sefer from the Tzemach Tzedek already. So this is the mimer. So we'll try to understand what the mimer is, and it's a little complicated, but the nekuda, the point of the mimer is that when a person and Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe Rabbeinu Shapik comments, he's going to say this is every Talmud Chacham, every Rosh Yeshiva, every person that's a great scholar, someone that embodies the Torah, becomes Davik in the Torah, is Davik into the oil of Torah, the light of Torah, is someone that connects to the Madrega of Ayin, to the level of Math, the Madrega of Ayin, and therefore this person, you and me, whoever the person is, whoever becomes embodied, lives this way, becomes a conduit to reveal Hashem's presence no matter what the situation is, whether it could be revealed Hashem's presence within something that's very refined and holy, openly holy, as something as transcendent and spiritual realm, or something very mundane in the physical world. Because a person that is in a posture of Ayin, is a posture of experiential nothingness in themselves. But to really feel this, a classic way of saying this is that there's two versions in the Gemara Kedushin, how this is phrased. Either Anin Livreis L'Shamash Keni, I am created to serve my master, or Anin Lo Nivreisi El L'Shamash Keni, I am not created only for the purpose of serving my Creator. When you say I'm created for the purpose of serving my Creator, it means there's an I, there's a yesh, there's an existence, there's a me. And I am serving God, I am serving Hashem. But there's a particular tzura, there's a particular form to me. Whatever the form is my personality. Some people are, by nature, by their very constitution, by their mechanism, by their DNA almost. Certain people are very kind and open, expansive, and extroverted, and some people are very cerebral and very introverted and very heady and very lofty. There's different types of characters. So, I'm created to serve my master. It means in the personality that I have, I am expressing myself and doing the will of Hashem continuously. So if I'm this type of person, this is the way I'm expressing Hashem's presence in this world. Anin lo yivreisi means forget about yourself. It doesn't mean to really reject your personality. It's much more subtle than that. But for a moment, what it means is let's forget about yourself and say, what is the will of the Creator right now? So let's say a person, I'll give you an example. Let's say a person is in the middle of studying, doing something very spiritual and learning Torah, something very, very holy. And in the middle of them learning, they hear their baby, it's the middle of the night, in the middle of studying, and they hear their baby crying, and their wife had a really hard night, and she's exhausted, and you hear the child crying. So what do? You put down the Gemara, whatever you're learning, and you go take care of your child, which means I am serving Hashem. That's it. Now, Hashem wants me to learn, so I'm going to learn now. Now Hashem presented me with another opportunity that says that I cannot learn, because if I'm going to sit and learn, my wife is going to wake up, my children are going to wake up, and it's going to cause a lot of commotion. And to do my wife a favor, or the reverse, to do someone else a favor, I'm going to put myself aside and say, okay, I'm going to go to my child, I'm going to put my child to sleep, I'm going to give them a bottle, whatever I have to do, change them, whatever I have to do, because that's the Ratzon Hashem, that's the will of Hashem now. Because I'm serving Hashem. I'm not serving myself. I'm not intellectual, and I'm very cerebral. So I enjoy studying and I enjoy learning. So now I want to learn, and it's 2 a.m. and I want to learn, and don't disturb me. But Hashem says maybe that's an excellent thing that you were doing up until this point. But now at 2:05, I need you to go pamper your child, and you do it with the same enthusiasm because that's what Hashem wants. So I am not created only to serve my Creator. Is a posture that's beyond my tzara, beyond my form. I'm serving something that's higher than me. And I'm allowing the thing that's higher than me to come through me at any time. And whatever is demanded of me at this time, that's what I have to do. And I do it with not only with no resistance, but I do it with joy. Because that's exactly what the Ratzon Hashem, the will of Hashem, is to create. Is to be manifested through this particular way of me being in this world right now. That's the idea of the nothingness. That's really the Ayin in Avodah, in a spiritual practice. In Avodah Hashem, how a person connects to God, connects to himself, connects to their inner self, is I am serving something that's higher than me. That's my desire. My desire is to be connected to something that's higher. And I'm reading the messages. I'm seeing what is needed for me. And that's what you get to see in the character of Moshe Rabbeinu. Versus where the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this from the name of the Maggid. The verse is the character of Rebbe Mendel. Of course, we're talking about the Avos HaKadoshim. But let's see what the Alter Rebbe has to say in this mimer. So Marein Lasem Kasher Yoifim Sein Chayfin, so it speaks about in the Nevuah, the prophet, that there is wheels, and Oifim is a type of wheel or a type of angel. represented in a wheel which is turning, which means like a movement that's transforming spirituality into physicality, some type of transmitter. And there's one wheel within the other wheel. So just like we have two wheels, and you have a lower wheel and an upper wheel, like a wheel within a wheel, and if they're spinning, so when the wheel's on top, then the higher wheel is above the lower wheel. So when you're spinning the wheel, the top wheel is higher than the lower wheel. But when the wheel spins to the bottom, let's say you mark the wheel at a certain point, when that point reaches the bottom, then the lower part of the wheel, the inner wheel, will be higher than the outer wheel. This is what it speaks about in the prophecy. What does that mean? It means it's something that could be higher and lower simultaneously. It can be higher at a certain point and lower at a different point. What does that mean? So the pasuk says, it says about that there's a spirit of life that exists within these ifanim, these angels that are called cycles or wheels, chariots. The liksiv ruach hachayas. It doesn't say the spirit of the life, of the various forms of life, because there's dal chayes merkava. In fact, there's four faces of the merkava of the chariot. And there's a face of there's a Pnei Kruv, and there's a Pnei Adam, there's a Pnei Arya, Pnei Nesher. There are different faces of the chariot. And then Nevuos Yecheskel, the prophecy of Yecheskel. And one face is the face of a lion, the face of a beast, of a shor, the face of a Nesher, the face of a child, the face of an adult. The shor was changed later. The bull was changed after Yecheskel prayed, but there was different visions. So he saw different types of things in this chariot, and yet it talks about one life force that's animating all of them. So what this means is, this is a life force. This is a chayis. This is from a place, from a life force that's animating these angels, is a life force that is so transcendent that it could be higher and lower simultaneously. And in fact, whatever is higher descends much lower. And it doesn't make a distinction between Hashav, Masha, Katal, and Gadol. Something doesn't make a distinction between what's above and below, which means that it comes from a transcendent light that doesn't have yet a particular form. The Ruach HaChaya you do when it talks about a Ruach HaChaya, which is vested in the particular, then the Ruach HaChaya has each individual face of the chariot has a very distinct light, animating force. For example, the animating force that exists within a foot is very different than the animating force that exists within a hand. Yet they're both alive. So there's one is a chayes prati, the particular life force, and one is a chayes koli, the general life force that's animating this thing to existence. The existence of something, the chomer of something, not the tzur, not the form, the chomer of something, the extra substance of the thing, not its form, comes from this one particular life force that gives life to everything. So then the Alter Rebbe says, we're skipping a little bit, but therefore, on the day of Shavuos, the day of the receiving of the Torah, was the revealing of the 50th gates. Because Sphira, the days of Sphira, the counting, was 7 weeks. 7 times 7, 7 corresponds to the 7 spheres. So 7 times 7 is the 49 days. So the 49 days going out of Egypt until receiving the Torah, it means that we're going through a certain form of the spheres. That there's 7, this chesed is a particular sphere, there's kindness, and there's gur, which is restriction. Each one has a particular form, and they're divided generally into 7, and each 7 has within it 7. They correspond to the 7 Shemesh and Nuchakim. They correspond to the 7 names of Hashem, that there are 7 names corresponding to the 7 spheres, which correspond to the 7 particular ways that Hashem's presence is being revealed in this world. The divine light is being revealed in this world. Sometimes the light comes with a particular tzura, a particular form of chesed, and sometimes the divine light comes with a particular form which is called gvura. And, if it's a sunny day, for example, then you say there's kel chesed, then the world seems to be in a kinder space. The divine light seems to be shining in a kinder way. Now, of course, Gvura, and when it's Kshamim, when it's raining, then it's Yom Gvura. It's considered a day of Gvura, which is strength, power. The world is receiving nourishment. So the reflection of the divine light is expressed in every single moment, not only every single day, but every single moment in a particular form. That's the 7 times 7. That's what the world is created in 7 days. The 7 corresponds to the 7 spheres, which means that every day has a tzura, every day has a particular form. That corresponds to the days going from Pesach, from going out of Egypt until getting into to receiving the Torah. But we receive the Torah on the day of the 50th day. Why? Because the 50th corresponds to beyond the 49, which means that it represents the transcendence, the 50th gate, which is the light that is transcendent of higher and lower. So therefore, the Shar Chamish, the 50th gate, is transcendent of the 49, means that it's higher and surrounds all the other 49 levels. And therefore there's no higher and there's no lower. It's a transcendent light that's beyond lower and beyond higher, because there is no form to it. It's infinite in its potential. That's another way of phrasing it. In the finite, then there's a particular form, it's a particular tzura. You'll say it's this finite light that's being revealed, or this particular finite light that's being revealed. I'm being very kind, or I'm being a big disciplinarian. So either way, there's a certain tzura, a certain form that I'm being expressive in this world. But on the day that we receive the Torah, we receive the Torah, both the positive and negative commands. I'm sure Gashmi is, but the Torah was revealed where the Torah, if you look at the 10 Commandments, so the Baal HaTurim brings down that there is 620 oisis in the Torah in the Aseret Hadibros, the 620 letters, which means that 620 is kesed. That's the numeric value of the word crown. A crown is something that transcends the head. In other words, when you have, let's say, garments, so you have a shirt that goes on the top part of the body, and feet, and pants that go to the lower part of the body, and each one's tailored specifically for that part of the body. But then the metaphor of a crown is that it sits above the head, technically sitting above the entire body, which means it's sitting above the head, but it's also sitting above the legs, which means it's something that's transcendent of the entire self. So when there was a revealing of the Kesser of Torah, the Kesser, the crown of Torah, where there was a revealing of the crown of Torah, where was it revealed? In the higher and the lower simultaneously. Which means if you look at the 10 Commandments, on one hand you have Anochi Hashem Elokecha, which is I am the one God, absolute monotheism, the oneness of the Creator, absolute Ein Elolah, there's nothing else besides the Creator. That's really the absoluteness of monotheism. That there's not only one Creator or a higher Creator, but there is only one, Ein Elovade, and which was the experience at Sinai. On the other hand, if you look at what some of the 10 Commandments are, it seeks out it talks about don't steal, don't kill, which is very mundane civil laws, which are rational laws, civil laws. Every civilization, any functioning civilization knows that you can't steal. I mean, if you can't create a civilization with theft, because if you steal from me, the other person steals from the other person. If I steal from you, the other person steals from me. There's no civilization. So every civilization, every functioning civilization has moral law. Moral law is almost like human law. So it's very mundane. So on the one hand, Matan Torah, the revealing of the Torah was something that was transcendent. It was an out-of-body experience. Literally, the way the sages described the event at Sinai was they had an out-of-body experience. They left, and the angels at the Yidodun, that they experienced an ecstasy, that they transcended their space, and they went back, so to speak, and they transcended their body, and they needed to, like a form of Tchias HaMesim, some type of resurrection, which is a high transcendent state of ecstatic spiritual experience, a collective spiritual experience which they were experiencing. That was on the one hand. On the other hand, what they actually heard was don't steal, which is very mundane, very practical, very, very moral, and very ethical, and very mundane, that every child can understand in order for a civilization to function. These are the laws. So why? Because the Torah is a revealing of the divine light, of the highest light, that transcends the definitions of higher and lower, or transcends the definition between what we call spiritual and what we call physical. It's a divine light. It's a likus. The spirituality is a form. There's a particular form of spirituality, just as there's a form of physicality. Physicality form is my body, or my experience, or my emotions, my thoughts. That's not one time. Then there's the spirituality of form, my spiritual experience, and my spiritual thoughts. But it also has a form, even an angel. It's a form. There's a quality to it. Form is already defined. It's already finite. When there's a revealing of infinite light, the infinite light, the Kesser, the crown, the transcendent light of the Creator, when there was a revealing of that Christ, the Kesser Shel Torah, therefore it was a revealing that transformed us and affected us and transform the world in a way in its spiritual constitution. There was a radical transformation of the spiritual world, and also a radical transformation in the physical world. The above and below were merged, and the below entered the above, and the above entered the below, and there was a merging of these two. This is the experience of Sinai, which means it's beyond form. There is no form. You can't quantify it because it's expressed in everything. Therefore, it's expressed both in the higher and in the lower. And who is the transmitter of that experience? Now, we all receive the Torah, but who is the transmitter of the experience in the most revealed way, or at least in certain of the commandments that were heard, was through Moshe. It was through Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Daber. There was the level of Moshe, because since Moshe was, all the 49 levels were revealed into Moshe, the 49 levels of Bina that Chazal telling Gemara says Rosh Hashanah, which means that Moshe Rabbeinu was was just one step removed from the 50th level, and on the deeper level of reading it, means the lack is actually the 50th level. So you have 49 levels of tsura, of form, of understanding, Memtashari Bina, 49 levels of understanding that he understood, and the 50th level is the Ayin. That the Memtashar were given to Moshe Chutz Me'echad, besides one is the absence of the one. The absence of the one is the Ayin. Moshe was the Bechina that was closest to the Ayin, and therefore Moshe says, V'anachnu ma. Moshe is the Madrega of Ayin. Moshe is the level of Ayin. The Shalach Kodesh writes that if you fill out the name Moshe, Mem with like Mem and Shin Yud Nun, and Hey, then you have Ma'ayin. Hey Aleph, then you have Ma'ayin. Then you have the filling letters of Moshe. Mem is Mem, and Shin Yud Nun, and Hey Aleph. The filling letters, which is Aleph, Yud Nun, and Mem is Ma'ayin, from nothingness, which means Moshe comes from the Madrega of Ayin. Moshe is the Bechina Ayin. Moshe is the embodiment of the quality of Ayin. Because Moshe is the embodiment of Ayin, which means he doesn't have a tsura, doesn't have a form. Therefore, Moshe was able to be the one, the conduit to reveal the Torah, which is the Kisser of Torah, the Kesser of Torah, the crown of the Torah. And now the Alter will say, let's contrast that to Avram. Moshe was the Noitzer Chesed, was connected to the Midas Yigimel Sarachim, which is beyond form. Therefore, he was the Noitzer, Oisis Moshe. Moshe is Oisis Noitzer, the form, the Tzinor. He was the conduit that was revealed, 13 attributes of mercy. And the Alter Rebbe says like this: that there's two types of Chesed. There's Chesed of Avram and Chesed of Moshe. There's two types of kindness, which these two, Moshe and Avram drew down. Moshe drew down one level of Chesed, and which is the Noitzer Chesed, the forming of Chesed, the creating the Tzura, and Noitzer is numerically the word Moshe, which means the creating the Tzura of Moshe of Chesed, and Avram was Chesed, Oiser Chesed, was one that created Chesed in this world. So Avram, if you look in the Torah, Avram Avinu, Abraham, if you look in the Torah, Avram is Isha Chesed. Avram Oyavoy is a man of Chesed. Avram, as Chazal speak about him, with an open tent and a giver, and a person that's waiting for guests, and a person that has a Chnasas Orchim and does Levia. And a person is a very kind, giving person. That's the nature of Avram. And that's the way he expressed himself, and that's the way he lived his life. So much so that it says in Sefer HaBoyer that the Midah HaChesed, the attribute, the divine attribute, the embodiment of Chesed, of kindness in this world, said we don't have it to function any longer because Avram is that Midah, is that attribute now in this world. So Avram is the Tzura, is the form of Chesed in its highest potential, in its highest manifestation and revelation. This is what Avram is. But Avram is still a Tzura. There's still a Tzura to Avram. Avram is Chesed, and Yitzchak is Gvura. Yitzchak represents the opposite form, which is the idea of Gvura. Yitzchak digs wells, he draws up, he unveils. This is an idea of coming from the bottom below, which Avram is from the top to the above, and then Yaakov is a synthesis, which is the Tiferes, which means each one has a particular tzura, form. Moshe Rabbeinu, on the other hand, in contrast to Avram, in this particular mimer that we're talking about, of course, each one has a mila, but in this analogy, Moshe Rabbeinu is the Noitzer Chesed. He stands beyond the experience or the expression of chesed, and he forms, not he doesn't form, he draws down, he's a tziner that draws down the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Hashem in this world. He becomes a perfect conduit to reveal Hashem's chesed. Because Moshe doesn't have a tzir. Moshe doesn't have a form. Moshe Rabbeinu, if you look in the Torah, even if you just follow the story, Moshe Rabbeinu is, sometimes he seems to be angry and to be very aggressive and even kills someone, or literally or not, kills a Mitzri. Moshe also is the most compassionate and kind person when he sees, two people fighting, or he sees someone else, a foreigner, fighting with someone that he doesn't even know. He stands up for the oppressed. And there's a backstory Moshe has chosen. And one hand, Moshe is the big intellectual, and then on the other hand, he's a receiver of Torah, and the other, and every mishpat kasha, every harsh judgment has to go to Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the embodiment of das, of the intellect. On the other hand, Moshe is a very soft person emotionally. So Moshe really is, what's Moshe? The bechina of Moshe, not Moshe himself. What is the bechina of Moshe? What is the attribute or the quality of Moshe? Moshe is, like the Torah says, at the end of the Torah, is Eved Hashem. He's a servant to Hashem. That's what Moshe is. Moshe is an Anam Mikol Adam. He's the humblest of men, because Moshe is a person that serves God. Doesn't serve himself. He doesn't serve his surah. Doesn't serve his particular form. He's serving Hashem. And whatever Hashem wants to come through him, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is revealing. Whatever the light that has to come through him, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu becomes the tziner, the conduit that allows that light to flow through. This is the madrega of Mavir, that it's passing through Moshe, right? This is the level of Moshe, and therefore Moshe doesn't have a tzur, because Moshe doesn't have a tzur. He's Ayin. That's why Moshe is that madrega of Ayin. Moshe is the level of Ayin, because he's the level of Ayin. He is the conduit that reveals this level, that reveals any tzur. And therefore, it goes from the highest. It can be revealed to the highest, it can be revealed to the lowest, because Avram has a tzura, chesed. The Alter Rebbe was going to say that when Noitzach has Alafim, that Alafim is that it's being drawn down from the Aleph, it's being drawn down, then it's being drawn down into the spiritual world. But only Moshe Rabbeinu was able to draw down the Chesed. He's connected to the Keser. Moshe is connected to the level of Keser, the Ayin, and therefore Moshe can draw down even to the lowest madregas, even to the lowest places. And therefore, Moshe Shapik Hamra. Therefore, Safra used to say, Safra, one of the Morim used to say, Safra is also Gematria, it's brought down in Sfarim, Safra is also Gematria Moshe. The same numeric value as the word Moshe, but Safra in particular used to say, when they say Moshe Shapik Hamra, someone used to say a good idea, he said, Moshe, you sound like Moshe. Moshe, you said a good idea in the Talmud, which means that this sage was the embodiment of Moshe. Rabbi Yosef, Maggid of Mezritch. Rabbi Yosef, on the other hand, in contrast to Rabbi Yosef, sometimes the Gemara says, Maggid of Mezritch, like it's a quote, like the God of Avram, the master of Avram. So sometimes the sages are considered similar to Avram, and sometimes the sages are parallel to Moshe. And the Alter Rebbe says that every Rosh Hashiva really stands in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu. Really, this is a Rambam. The Rambam writes in Sanhedrin that the Nasi in the Sanhedrin is B'makam Moshe Rabbeinu, is in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu, which means the person that's the teacher of Torah, a person that's a Rosh Hashiva, a person that's that teaching Torah to people, is really the embodiment of Moshe Shapik, the idea of Moshe. But what is Ba'omek? This is the mimer. This is what Alter Rebbe says. But what is the depth of this saying? Saying is, it's almost counterintuitive to what you would think, because intuitively you would say that Moshe represents, or the scholar, the Rosh Hashiva, the scholar, the Torah scholar, represents someone that has a very, very particular surah, very, very particular form, and they have their particular way of thinking, and particular way of expressing, and therefore the scholarship is revealed to them in a very particular way. That's what a scholar is. They use their own intelligence to try to figure it out, to connect to the teachings, and then they try to give over these teachings. Says the Alter Rebbe that the real definition of a scholar, this is also a very Chassidic word, obviously, a very Chassidic teaching, very much connected to the Torah of Hashem, the teachings of Hashem and the Maggid, that Alter Rebbe says that no, what a scholar is someone that's really Davuk HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What a scholar is, what a Torah scholar is really what the Alter Rebbe writes in Megillah Esther, in the Maimarim, that the definition of a Talmud Chacham, he's a Talmud of a Chacham. He's a student of Chachma. Chachma, wisdom is Ma'ayin Timatzah. Chachma represents the world of Ayin. That the definition of a Talmud Chacham is not someone that it's intellectual. it's almost the opposite. It's someone, of course, someone that's intellectual, otherwise you wouldn't have the scholarship. But it's someone that's davik to the ayin, to the chachma, to the likus shebedavar, to the divinity within that. Which means a scholar is someone that's really someone that can really transmit Torah in a way that Moshe Shapir commented. The person could say, and this person that you're like a miniature Moshe Rabbeinu, is someone that has no ego. Which means, of course, they use their intellect to understand, etc., etc. But the depth of their constitution, of who they truly are, is I'm not here just to serve Hashem. And because I know one, I teach. Because I know Aleph, I teach Aleph, and I know Beis, so I teach Beis. Because I know one thing, I teach one thing. If I know two things, I do two things. Why? Because that's the Ratzon Hashem. That is the will of Hashem. Because Talmud Chacham Sheigil Le'Ra'apur, a Talmud Chacham that is ready to, could express and could teach, and is not, is Chas Shalom. It's a negative thing. It's a reflection of a negative thing. It's not humility. It's the opposite of humility. That's why Talmud Chacham has to have a Shmini Shemeshminis, like the Alter Rebbe writes there in Megillas Esther. He has to have a little bit of the ego. The ego, not the ego of the self. The ego is that if I know one, my job is to teach one. If I know Aleph, my task is to teach Aleph. If I know Aleph and Beis, Gimel, then I have to teach Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. To recognize that there's a will of Hashem, there's a divine presence of Hashem that has to flow, not from me, but through me. And I have to be engaged. Every person has to be engaged in the text and engaged in the process of using their intellect and using their mind and using their heart and using their openness and their own capacities and own talents, etc. What they can be engaged with the text, engaged with the Torah, but ultimately to be an expression, a tzinor, just a conduit that reveals Hashem's light in this world. And that's the Ayin. That's really the Bechina Ayin. That's really the level of Ayin. And that's why it's a teaching that, if you understand, it's a very, very clear, connected teaching to the teachings of the Maggid of Mezritch. Clearly, it's his first Torah. It's a Torah that he said in the first year of him becoming a Rebbe. It's a Torah that was heard by Rebbe Mendel of Vitepsk, who, like I said before in the beginning, was very much connected to the same Torah of the teaching of the Ayin, who gives it over to the Alter Rebbe, who is also very much connected to the Ayin, in using the oasis of Chassidus Chabad, using the language of Chabad, of understanding, and to articulate this idea, but ultimately to articulate the idea of nothingness.